Hey friends, we're seeing the whole defund, dismantle police thing, and I want to go over some stuff with you. Maybe we'll both learn a little something. I wrote these notes, these bullets, because I wanted to discuss this. And if you've got friends and family that are telling you the police need to be dismantled, defunded, I think we're going to change their mind. So let's follow along. First of all, the defunding and dismantling of police. They say that we get paid too much. Well, let's talk about pay and benefits. Pay and benefits are commensurate to the type of officer you're gonna get. I mean, if you want a minimum wage officer, not that minimum wage is a bad thing, but for someone that's going to be in a career for 20 to 30 years, a minimum wage isn't going to get you the highest quality employee. So the pay is commensurate to the quality of the officers. As a matter of fact, when we look at the quality of officers, we look at certain things such as education. FBI crime stats and some studies indicate that educated officers are more likely to adhere to policy and less likely to use unnecessary force. That doesn't mean that educated officers are smarter. No, it means educated officers have a propensity to have a more global view. It just means that they were able to finish a course study. It has nothing to do with their aptitude or intelligence. I know plenty of smart people that don't have degrees, and I know plenty of people have degrees that are not too particularly smart. And we'll get to that in a minute. Another thing that we consider when we're talking about funding is training and equipment. Training and equipment costs money. A lot of people think we train each other in-house, which we do a lot of. There are some things that we train in-house, but who trains those trainers? We take those trainers to train the trainer courses. And a lot of those training courses are run by private enterprises. They're for-profit entities that need to make money, so they train their trainers, they pay for the training equipment, they pay for a lot of things that go into what we consider training. Equipment, that's a whole other subject matter, but we have to talk about it. The equipment we use is used hard. For instance, our cars. They're driven 24 hours a day. I drive a car for 12 hours, and guess what? It gets passed on to the next shift for 12 hours. And during those 24-hour shifts, the car idles. It's driven a lot of miles. It's driven fast. It's driven slow. It goes in pursuits. It gets in crashes. So the average lifespan of a police car is a lot less than a civilian-driven vehicle. Let's talk about medical costs. I mean, officers go through a lot. I've been a cop for 20 years. I can't say that the Sam Brown and the vest has been my friend. I wear it, but boy, there are days I wish I didn't have that thing cinched on my body. So it's no surprise that officers have back problems. And those are work-related injuries, so guess who absorbs the costs, right? Well, it's not just the officers who get injured or have medical expenses. It's the people that we encounter. If we take someone into our custody, guess what? We're their guardian. So if someone falls ill or gets injured while in our custody, we pay for that. Our municipalities, our counties, our states, you taxpayers all pay for that. So that's just a nutshell of some of the money that's being used in our budget. It's not necessarily that officers are overpaid. We're not. I mean, if you think about the things that we do, we're severely underpaid. Do officers live well? Well, in my state, sure. Some officers do. But those some officers are officers that have double incomes, whether their spouses work or they have two jobs themselves. I've traveled everywhere in this country, speaking on about police subject matter, and I see officers that struggle. I see officers that have to work 2, sometimes 3 jobs. Myself, I work 2 jobs. I'm a full-time police officer and a part-time professor teaching communications, journalism, and public relations. So, you know, I make good money doing that, but I also work very hard to do that. Let's move on to what happens if we dismantle the police. Well, right now what you see is it's going to be a big difference. Police officers are currently proactively patrolling. We're a proactive entity. What does that mean? It means when we're not answering radio calls, we're proactively patrolling. We patrol a designated area. We do enforcement stops. We do vehicle stops. We do pedestrian checks. And we ensure that the neighborhood is safe. And if we see something wrong, we make an observation. We do something about that. But guess what? That's going to all end when funding goes away and officers are doing less because they're making less. It's not that they are doing more because they make more, but you're not going to find motivated officers, right? Especially when people are telling them that they don't deserve to be in the position that they are, that they're corrupt, and they're saying all these things, and deep down inside, the overwhelming majority of police officers do a good job every day. Uh, Without going on into a tangent, I'll say this briefly. Are there bad cops? Absolutely. But cops are human. It's the same thing as saying, are there bad humans? I use this analogy. People say cops have a high divorce rate. But people have a high divorce rate. It's not fair to say that. I could apply that to doctors, lawyers, teachers. Everybody in America has a high divorce rate because people have a high divorce rate. But when you add a title to it, it is accurate, but you got to look at the global picture. All right. But moving on, if we do no disrespect to firefighters, but if we change our proactive patrol to reactive patrol, much like firefighters who all stay at the station, they polish the trucks, they clean the firehouse, they make meals, they go shopping, they go eating, everything until they get a call for service. If that happens, you can say goodbye to ridding crime on the streets. It's the reality is when there's no patrol, guess what? The criminals are going to be on the street. And a lot of people think, you know what, we'll police ourselves. That's fine, but who's going to keep those people accountable? We'll go into accountability in a minute. I just made some notes here, so let me just go back to make sure I didn't miss anything. Officer-initiated activity will also be diminished. There'll be no OBS or traffic stops like I mentioned before. With that said, muggings on the street, we've already reduced shoplifting to misdemeanor crimes where most people are getting cited out. That's just going to be on the increase. Businesses are going to fold. Residents are going to be decrepit, and your nice neighborhoods that you might live in are going to be crime-ridden. Also, who are going to be there for the abuse victims? Rape victims, child abuse victims, spousal assault victims. Yes, a lot of people argue they can be handled by counselors, people that are equipped to provide therapeutic services to them. But what about when it comes time to having to do the enforcement on that action? What if the person that committed the crimes need to go to jail? Who's going to arrest them? The counselors? That's something to consider too. All right, so arguing that police aren't held accountable. If people are actually saying we aren't held accountable, why are we here in this situation right now? Why are the people protesting and rioting? Because the people hold us accountable. The people are vocal about it. The looting, the rioting, that's all crap. I mean, I understand people are mad. People have a right to protest. But I've spoken to protesters myself that say they're not about the looting. They're not about the rioting. They're not about the violence. These people are taking an opportunity to be on the streets in the name of protesting, but they're doing it in much more destructive fashion. Okay, so as far as accountability, a lot of people think there's too many cops to keep accountable, and that's just not the case. The problem isn't too many cops. The problem is not enough cops. If we look at the 328 million people living in the U.S., 328 million, and look at the highest number of cops we've ever had, and that's 800,000. 800,000 cops to police 328 million. Don't you think there's actually a lot of fingers pointing to the cops? Right? There's actually, if I do quick math, like 1,600 people per every cop. Or is it 16,000? I'm Asian, I should know math, right? But anyways, there's a lot more people than there are cops. And I can't calculate the ratio right now, but there's a lot of fingers pointing at cops. Cops are out there with video cameras pointed at them. They've got their supervisors, they've got their peers, they've got the neighbor patrolling them. The accountability is there. We've come a long way in modern policing that keeps officers accountable. Sure. Are there some idiots in our field? Absolutely. But they're a very, very small minority of the police. So if you take up the police, who are a minority in of themselves anyway, and then you take up a minority amongst the minority, that's a very, very small number. But you don't see that on the news because the news has an agenda. That's a totally different story. Okay, so if you think less police is the answer, you're absolutely wrong. The answer is we need more police. We need better trained police. It's not necessarily, let's just throw as many people out there as possible. We need officers that are representative of the neighborhoods that they're from. We need officers who actually grew up in the neighborhood so they can become invested in the neighborhood. Well, if you grew up in the neighborhood, you're going to be invested in the neighborhood. We need officers who have family and friends in the neighborhood. I mean, the more of a significant relationship we have with the neighborhood, the more attached we feel to it. The more attached we feel to it, the more empathy we're going to have to do our job effectively. I don't live in the community that I work in. I didn't grow up in the community that I grew up in, but I do a good job for my community. But I've seen a different type of empathy from my partners who actually live or grew up in the city. They do a little bit more in terms of community relations. They live in the city, so they show up to more community events. And I think that's what we need. We need to have officers be a part of the community, not just work in the community, but be a part of the community. And another thing we should do is hire officers that have life experience. I talked about educated officers, but you know, being book smart is just one component of being an effective officer. You have to be street smart as well. That means officers have to come from a lifestyle that has given them some street smarts. People that have been there. You know, a lot of people on social media who follow me know that I have been through a lot in my life. I'm married with children, and I lost my parents very tragically. You know, these are all things I can pull from to build the relationship I have with the public and be empathetic and understanding. And that's a huge component of what makes an effective officer. Bottom line, defunding and dismantling police departments are going to be a huge detriment to society and neighborhoods. I mean, realistically, who are you going to call? Who are you going to call? So the answer, my friends, is not less police. It's not necessarily more police, but the answer is more quality police. I'm Aram Cho, and those are my 2 cents. Thanks for listening.